Ambassador Jinwoo walked through the halls of Council Station Prime with his usual quiet dignity. His dark suit was perfectly pressed, his expression calm. He had walked these corridors for 15 years, and in all that time very few beings had bothered to learn his name. To most of the Galactic Council he was simply the human ambassador, or sometimes just the human. The council chamber rose before him, a massive dome of transparent crystal that looked out into the stars. 47 species met here to decide the fate of thousands of worlds. Jinwoo took his seat in the back row where Earth's representative always sat. The front rows belonged to the elder races, the ones who had founded the council 12,000 years ago. The Vocari matriarch entered first. Her crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. She was beautiful and ancient, and she knew it. Behind her came the Kelthan delegation, tall beings with silver skin who moved like flowing water. Then the Nephrim collective floated in, clouds of sentient gas contained in environmental suits. Jinwoo waited patiently as they took their places. He had a proposal to present today. Earth had developed a new water purification system that could help the drought-stricken worlds in the Outer Rim. It was simple, cheap, and effective. His team had tested it for 3 years. When his turn came to speak, Jinwoo stood and activated the holographic display. Before he could say 10 words, the Vocari matriarch's voice cut through the chamber. Ambassador, we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, but the elder races have managed water distribution for millennia. I'm sure your method is adequate for human needs. The Kelthan senator nodded in agreement. Perhaps the humans should focus on maintenance duties rather than policy proposals. That is where your species excels, is it not? Jinwoo sat down without another word. Around the chamber, a few representatives from younger species looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. This was how it always went. After the session ended, Jinwoo walked to the medical wing. Dr. Hee-won was there, organizing supplies with her usual efficiency. She had kind eyes and tired hands. For 20 years, she had run the Medical Relief Division, training doctors from every species, developing protocols that saved millions of lives. Another rejection? Hee-won asked, not looking up from her work. They didn't even let me finish presenting, Jinwoo replied. Hee-won smiled sadly. Last week, the Nephrim Collective told me that human medical practices were overly cautious. They wanted to streamline the Vorten plague vaccine protocol. I warned them it could destabilize the formula. They said I was being dramatic. Did they change it? They're planning to next month. Jinwoo said nothing. There was nothing to say. They had been having conversations like this for years. Down in the engineering sector, Donghyun was elbow-deep in the environmental control systems. He was a stocky man with grease on his hands and patience in his heart. Every day he kept the station's air breathable, the water clean, the temperature stable. Thousands of beings lived on this station, and not one of them knew his name. His assistant, a young human woman named Minji, handed him a tool. The Kelthan engineers filed another complaint about our methods, she said. They say we're overcomplicating the maintenance schedules. Donghyun shook his head. These systems are complicated. That's why they work. But they won't listen. Should we simplify the procedures like they want? If we do that, something will break. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but it will break. Donghyun tightened a connection and checked his readings. We'll keep doing it right. That's all we can do. In the logistics center, Bora managed the flow of goods across 300 worlds. She was brilliant with numbers, able to see patterns that computers missed. The supply network she had designed was a masterpiece of efficiency. Food, medicine, and resources reached every corner of council space exactly when needed. Her team worked in a windowless room filled with holographic displays. They tracked thousands of ships, millions of containers, billions of items. It looked chaotic to outsiders, but Bora knew exactly where everything was and where it needed to go. A Vocari administrator visited her office that afternoon. The matriarch wants to optimize the logistics network, he said. She believes it can be made more efficient. Bora pulled up her displays. The network is already operating at 98.7% efficiency. Any changes would require... The matriarch is not asking for your opinion. She is informing you of the decision. After he left, Bora sat in silence. 98.7%. She had spent decades achieving that, and they thought it could be done better because they didn't understand how it worked. Across the station, in the education sector, Taemin taught conflict resolution to children from a dozen different species. He was patient and gentle, with a gift for helping young beings understand each other. His programs had been implemented in schools across the galaxy. Planets that had been at war for generations were now raising children who knew how to talk instead of fight. But the Council's Education Committee had just voted to cut funding for his department. Cultural exchange programs are a luxury, they said. We need to focus on essential services. Taemin didn't argue. He simply nodded and began planning how to continue his work with less resources. He had become very good at doing more with less. That evening, all the senior human representatives met in Jinwoo's quarters. Haiwan, Donghyun, Bora, Taemin, and 24 others. They sat in a circle drinking tea and sharing their stories. It's getting worse, Haiwan said. They used to at least pretend to listen. They take everything we build and act like it appeared by magic, Donghyun added. The station would fall apart without constant maintenance, but they think it runs itself. Jinwoo looked at each face in the room. These were good people. Brilliant people. They had given years of their lives to the Council, asking nothing in return but basic respect, and they had never received it. I think it's time, he said quietly. Everyone knew what he meant. They had discussed it before in careful whispers. The possibility that had seemed too drastic, too final, but now, looking at each other's tired faces, they all understood. When? Bora asked. Soon, Jinwoo replied. Very soon. Over the next week, messages traveled through secure channels to every human in Council space. Scientists received them. Engineers received them. Teachers, doctors, merchants, and security officers. The messages were simple and clear. Prepare to leave. Pack only what you need. Tell no one. Jinwoo spent those days creating a data chip. He worked late into the night compiling information. Every system humans had built. Every network they maintained. Every protocol they had developed. 23,000 pages of detailed documentation. At the bottom, he wrote a brief message. He chose his words carefully, then read them one more time before finalizing the chip. On the morning of the council session, Jinwoo dressed in his best suit. He walked to the chamber with the data chip in his pocket. The session proceeded normally. The elder races discussed trade agreements and border disputes. No one asked for Earth's input. When there was a brief pause, Jinwoo stood. He walked to the central podium. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He placed the data chip on the podium with a soft click that seemed very loud in the sudden silence. Then he turned and walked out. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't offer explanations. He didn't demand anything or make threats. He simply left. Behind him, the chamber erupted in confused murmurs. The Vokari matriarch stared at the data chip but made no move to examine it. The Kelthon senator laughed. Dramatic as always, these humans. By sunset, every human had begun packing. By midnight, the first ships were leaving. By dawn, Jinwoo stood on the bridge of a transport vessel, watching Council Station Prime grow smaller in the viewport. No regrets? Haiwan asked, standing beside him. Jinwoo thought for a moment. We gave them everything we had. We asked only to be heard. If they couldn't give us that much, then we have nothing to regret. The stars stretched before them as the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, in the council chamber, the data chip sat untouched on the podium. No one had bothered to check what it contained. They would soon wish they had. Captain Woojin received the order at 0400 hours. He was commanding a security fleet on the edge of council space, protecting the borders from pirates and raiders. For 12 years, his ships had kept these regions safe. Now he was being told to withdraw every vessel and return to Earth. He read the message 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he called his officers together. We're going home, he said simply. His second-in-command, a woman named Daun, frowned. All of us? What about the border patrols? All of us. Every human ship, every human crew member. We leave in 6 hours. But sir, the Varelli sector has been having pirate problems. Without our patrols, I know, Woojin said, but our orders are clear. Within 6 hours, 48 human security vessels had left their posts. They didn't file reports. They didn't request permission. They simply powered up their engines and jumped away. Behind them, the borders of council space suddenly had large, unguarded gaps. Trade Administrator So Min was in the middle of negotiating a shipping contract when she got her orders. She was a sharp woman who, had spent 20 years building relationships with merchants across the galaxy. Human trade ships carried goods that others couldn't or wouldn't transport. They went to dangerous regions, handled delicate cargo, and never missed a delivery. So-Min stood up in the middle of the negotiation. "I apologize, but I must leave immediately." The Kelthon merchant looked confused. "We're not finished. The contract, you'll need to find another carrier. Good luck." So-Min gathered her things and walked out. By the end of the day, every human merchant vessel had been recalled. Hundreds of contracts were left incomplete. Cargo sat waiting at ports. Trade routes that had been reliable for decades suddenly had no ships to service them. In the agricultural sectors, Young Ho was supervising the harvest on a colony world. He was an expert in cross-species farming, knowing which crops grew well together and which fertilizers worked for which species. The colony had been struggling with food production for years before Young Ho arrived. Now they had surplus. His communicator buzzed. He read the message, then looked at the fields stretching to the horizon. He had planted those crops. He had taught the colonists how to care for them. But orders were orders. He called his team together. "We're leaving tonight. What about the harvest?" One of his assistants asked. "They'll have to finish it themselves. But they don't know how. We've always handled the complicated parts." Young Ho's jaw tightened. "I know, but we're done handling things for people who don't appreciate it." By the next morning, every human agricultural consultant had left council space. Colonies woke up to find the experts who managed their food production had vanished in the night. Yunji sat in the Central Information Systems control room, her fingers moving across holographic keyboards. She managed the data networks that connected thousands of worlds. Every message, every file transfer, every piece of information flowing through council space passed through systems she maintained. She began the shutdown sequence methodically. First, she activated the automated systems that would keep basic functions running. Then she began withdrawing the advanced protocols, the optimization algorithms, the security measures that humans had added over decades. Her supervisor, a Nephrim named Vorthak, floated into the control room. "What are you doing?" "Following orders," Yunji replied calmly. "What orders?" "You can't just shut down these systems." "I'm not shutting them down. I'm removing human-specific modifications and returning the networks to their original baseline function. You'll still have basic communication." "Basic? What does that mean?" Yunji finished her sequence and stood up. "It means the networks will work at about 40% of current efficiency. Good enough for essential communications." She walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and the security algorithms will be gone. You might want to update your firewalls." She left before Vorthak could respond. Behind her, the networks began their slow degradation. Nari was one of the last humans to leave Council Station Prime. She worked in the main database architecture, maintaining the information storage systems that held centuries of council records. She spent her final day carefully documenting the current status of every system, writing instructions in the simplest language possible. She left the documents in the database itself, though she suspected no one would find them. The council's technicians had never bothered learning how the deeper systems worked. They just assumed everything would keep functioning forever. As her ship departed, Nari watched the station through the viewport. It looked magnificent against the stars, a symbol of galactic unity. But she knew the truth. That station ran on systems that were about to become very difficult to maintain. "Do you think they'll figure it out?" her colleague asked. "Eventually," Nari replied. "The question is how much will break before they do." Back on Council Station Prime, the first signs of humanity's departure were starting to show. Administrative offices were empty. Maintenance schedules were unmanned. The medical wing was suddenly short-staffed. But most council members barely noticed. They had never paid attention to who did what work. The Vocari matriarch called an emergency session. "The humans have left," she announced. "All of them." Without warning or explanation, the Kelthon senator laughed. "Good riddance. Perhaps now we can run things properly without their constant interference and overcomplicated methods." A Nephrim representative added, "Their departure will allow more efficient species to take over essential functions. This is an opportunity, not a crisis." Other council members nodded in agreement. A few younger species looked worried, but they didn't speak up. The elder races were celebrating, and it seemed unwise to argue. "Should we examine that data chip the ambassador left?" a junior member asked timidly. The matriarch waved a crystalline hand dismissively. "It's probably just typical human drama. Some long complaint about not being appreciated. I'll review it when I have time. She never did. The data chip remained on the podium, untouched and ignored. On Earth, Jin Woo stood in a conference room with the other senior human representatives. They were watching news feeds from Council Space. Reports were coming in about the sudden human departure. Most of the coverage was dismissive or mocking. "They're calling us temperamental," Hyewan said, reading a Kelthon news site, saying we threw a tantrum and ran away. "Let them think that," Jinwoo replied calmly. "Words are easy. Reality will be harder." Donghyun was monitoring technical channels. The engineering teams on Council Station are already having problems. Environmental systems are showing fluctuations. They're trying to fix them using standard procedures. "Will that work?" someone asked. "For a while," Donghyun said. "But those systems need specific maintenance routines. We tried to teach them for years, but they always said our methods were too complicated. Now they'll learn why we did things that way." Bora was tracking the logistics networks. Ships are already getting confused. 3 cargo vessels showed up at the wrong planets today. The automated routing system is breaking down without constant human oversight. "How long before they notice?" Taemin asked. "They probably already notice," Bora replied. "But they don't understand why it's happening yet. They think it's just temporary glitches." Jinwoo walked to the window and looked out at Earth's blue sky. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was going about its business, confident that everything would continue running smoothly. They had built an entire civilization on humanity's invisible labor, and they genuinely believed that labor was unnecessary. "How long do we give them?" Hyewan asked. "As long as they need," Jinwoo replied. "We left them everything they need to rebuild. Instructions, documentation, technical manuals. If they're willing to learn, they can maintain everything themselves. And if they're not willing..." Jinwoo turned back to face the room. "Then they'll learn a different lesson, about what it costs to take people for granted." Across Council Space, human absence was beginning to spread like cracks in glass. Small problems appeared first. A hospital couldn't access a patient database. A school's learning program crashed. A water treatment plant's efficiency dropped by 15%. None of these seemed serious individually. Just minor annoyances, technical difficulties, but they kept happening. More each day, and no one quite understood why. In the council chamber, representatives gathered to discuss trade agreements and territorial disputes. Everything seemed normal. The elder races spoke with their usual authority. Decisions were made, documents were signed, and the data chip sat on the podium gathering dust, while the galaxy slowly began to break. Day 7 after humanity's departure began like any other on Council Station Prime. Representatives gathered for morning sessions. Coffee and its alien equivalents were consumed. Then someone tried to give a speech and chaos erupted. The Universal Translation Network crashed at Aero 947 station time. One moment, the Kelthon senator was speaking and everyone understood him. The next moment he was making sounds that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't Kelthon. The Vokari matriarch tried to respond, but her crystalline tones were just noise to non-Vokari ears. The Nephrim Collective's gaseous communications became incomprehensible vibrations. 47 species suddenly couldn't understand each other. The chamber descended into confusion. Representatives shouted in their native languages. Translators frantically tried to establish basic communication. After 2 hours, they managed to set up a crude system using written text, but it was painfully slow. A conversation that should take minutes now took hours. The Nephrim's best linguist, a being named Torvis, examined the translation network's code. What he found made his gaseous form ripple with distress. The code was written in a language he barely recognized. The optimization protocols used mathematical concepts he had never seen. The entire system was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. "Can you fix it?" his supervisor asked through the crude text translator. "Maybe," Torvis wrote back, "if I had 5 years and a team of experts. This isn't just a program. It's a masterwork. The humans built something incredible, and we never even noticed." By day 14, the medical crisis had begun. Dr. Silan was the head physician at Council Central Hospital. She was Kelthan, trained in the finest medical academies, and she had always considered human medical protocols to be overly cautious. So when the humans left, she decided to streamline things, make them more efficient. She started with the Vortan plague vaccine. The human protocol required a complex 17-step preparation process. Dr. Ceylon's team had studied it and concluded that 9 steps would be sufficient. They were confident. They were wrong. 3 days after implementing the new protocol, 6 patients died. The vaccine had become unstable. The molecular structure had degraded in ways that Dr. Ceylon's team hadn't predicted. She pulled the vaccine immediately and tried to recreate the human protocol, but the documentation used medical terminology she didn't fully understand. She wasn't alone in her struggles. Across the galaxy, doctors were discovering that human medical protocols weren't overcomplicated. They were precisely calibrated. Every step had a purpose. Every precaution was necessary. On the colony world of Prentice 4, a Vocari doctor tried to treat a patient with a cross-species infection. The human protocols had warned about specific drug interactions, but the doctor thought he knew better. The patient died within hours. 5 more patients died that week from similar errors. Medical facilities sent desperate requests to their central database for human contact information. But the humans were gone, and their emergency response teams weren't answering calls. Day 23 brought the food crisis. Bora's logistics network had seemed so simple. Ships picked up cargo, flew to planets, dropped off supplies, and moved to the next destination. Anyone could do it. Except they couldn't. The first major failure happened in the Darren system. 3 cargo ships arrived at once, each carrying perishable food. The dock facilities could only process 1 ship at a time. 2 ships sat in orbit while their cargo spoiled. A planet that should have received a month's worth of fresh food got 1 week's supply and thousands of tons of rotting produce. In the Kolvar sector, 5 ships missed their delivery windows entirely. They arrived at planets that had already received supplies from other vessels. Their cargo was unnecessary. Meanwhile, other planets starved. The automated routing system was breaking down. It was making decisions that looked logical on paper, but ignored real-world complications. Weather patterns, political tensions, port capacity, maintenance schedules. The humans had understood these factors instinctively. The computer systems did not. A Nephrim mathematician named Kellen tried to fix the routing algorithms. He worked for 16 hours straight, convinced he could optimize the system better than the humans had. His new algorithm looked perfect. On paper, it improved efficiency by 22%. In reality, it caused the worst logistics disaster in Council history. Ships arrived at wrong planets. Cargo manifests got crossed. Medical supplies ended up on agricultural worlds while farm equipment went to hospitals. Within 48 hours, Kellen's improvement had to be scrapped entirely. How did the humans make this work? He asked his team in frustration. No one had an answer. Day 35. The children stopped learning. Tayman's education programs had been running in schools across 300 worlds. Interactive lessons that adapted to each species' learning style. Cultural exchange programs that taught empathy and conflict resolution. They had seemed like simple software packages. They weren't. They were sophisticated learning systems that required constant updates and maintenance. Without human oversight, they began to fail. First slowly, then catastrophically. On the world of Cephis Prime, a school's entire learning system crashed. Teachers found themselves unable to access lesson plans, student records, or educational materials. They had to teach using primitive methods they hadn't employed in decades. The cultural exchange programs vanished overnight. Children who had been learning to understand other species suddenly had no framework for cross-cultural communication. On 17 worlds where these programs had been keeping ancient hatreds in check, violence began to resurface. Young beings who had never known war started learning the old prejudices from their parents. Without Tayman's programs to counteract generations of mistrust, the cycle of conflict began again. Day 42. Council Station Prime started dying. Dong-hyun had maintained the station's environmental systems for 20 years. He had made it look easy. Every morning he checked temperature controls, air composition, water recycling, waste management, and power distribution. It took him 3 hours of routine work each day. The station's new maintenance chief was a Kelthan engineer named Vortis. He was competent and experienced. He looked at the maintenance logs the humans had left behind and laughed. 3 hours of daily maintenance? Ridiculous. These systems are automated. 1 hour per week should be sufficient. On day 42, the temperature in the station's eastern quarters dropped by 8 degrees. Vortis sent a team to investigate. They found nothing obviously wrong. They made a few adjustments. The temperature stabilized. 2 days later, the air composition in the central hub became unstable. Oxygen levels dropped slightly. Carbon dioxide increased, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to be noticeable. Beings started feeling dizzy and tired. Vortis's team made more adjustments. Then the water recycling system began producing water with an odd taste. Then the power distribution started fluctuating. Then the waste management system backed up in 3 sectors. Each problem was fixable individually. But they kept coming, faster and faster. Vortis found himself working 16-hour days, racing from crisis to crisis. His team was exhausted. The station was falling apart around them. "I don't understand," Vortis told his second-in-command. "The systems aren't that old. They should work smoothly." His assistant pulled up the human maintenance logs and read them carefully for the first time. "Sir, the humans weren't just checking these systems. They were constantly adjusting them. Tiny corrections every day, preventing small problems before they became large ones. That's impossible. No one can predict failures that precisely. The humans could, and they did. Every day for decades." On day 49, someone finally checked the data chip. A junior Vocari technician named Zealous was trying to fix a database problem. He was searching through old council records when he found a reference to the human departure documentation. Curious, he traced it back to the data chip that still sat on the council chamber podium. He brought it to his supervisor, who brought it to their director, who brought it to the Vocari matriarch. That evening, the matriarch finally reviewed the chip's contents. It took her 12 hours to read it all. 23,000 pages of detailed documentation. Every system humans had built or maintained. Every protocol they had developed. Every network they had designed. The list was comprehensive, technical, and devastating. The humans had built everything that mattered. The translation network, the medical protocols, the logistics system, the education programs, the environmental controls, the security networks, the database architecture, the communication relays, the trade agreements, the diplomatic frameworks, everything. At the bottom was Ambassador Jinwoo's note. The matriarch read it 3 times. Then she called an emergency council session. When the representatives assembled, communication was still difficult without the translation network. But the matriarch managed to convey the situation using the crude text system. She showed them the documentation, explained what they had lost, made them understand the scale of their dependence on humanity. The Kelthon senator, who had celebrated the human departure, looked physically ill. The Nephrim Collective's representatives dimmed with distress. Even the proudest elder races understood the truth. They had built a civilization on humanity's invisible labor, and now that labor was gone. "Can we fix these systems ourselves?" someone asked. The matriarch's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty. "Perhaps, given time, resources, and expertise. But it will take years, maybe decades, and things are breaking faster than we can repair them." "What do? We learn," the matriarch said quietly. "We learn what the humans tried to teach us. We learn to value the quiet workers. We learn humility. Is it too late to ask them to return?" The matriarch looked at Jinwoo's message again. "I don't know, but we have to try." On Earth, Nari sat in a comfortable chair, drinking tea and reading reports. She had access to council communications. She heard their desperate attempts to fix what was breaking. She listened to their growing panic. "They're starting to understand," she told her colleagues. "Will they ask for help?" someone asked. "Eventually," Nari replied. "But the question is whether we'll answer when they do." Jinwoo joined them, his expression thoughtful. "The galaxy is learning a lesson. About respect, about value, about seeing the people who build the world you take for granted." "It's a harsh lesson," Heewon said. "Yes," Jinwoo agreed, "but some lessons have to be harsh to be learned." The Kelthan Elder Council met in emergency session 63 days after humanity's departure. Their chamber was magnificent, carved from living silver that flowed and shifted with their thoughts. But today, the beauty felt hollow. Elder Karath stood at the center, his silver skin dull with stress. "The Translation Network Restoration Project has failed again," he announced. "Our best linguists have been working for 2 months. We achieved 12% functionality before the entire system crashed. How is that possible?" Another elder asked. We have access to the original code. The code is only part of it, Kareth explained. The humans used optimization techniques we don't understand, mathematical models we can't replicate. Every time we think we figured it out, we discover another layer of complexity we missed. A junior member spoke up hesitantly. Could we ask the humans for help? The room fell silent. The idea of asking for help, of admitting they needed the species they had dismissed as maintenance crew, was almost unthinkable. But the alternative was watching their civilization crumble. On Council Station Prime, Vortis stood in the environmental control room surrounded by malfunctioning displays. He had barely slept in weeks. The station's systems were failing faster than he could fix them. 2 residential sectors had been evacuated due to air quality problems. The water recycling was operating at 60% capacity. Power fluctuations were causing equipment failures across the station. His team was exhausted and demoralized. They had tried everything. They had studied the human maintenance logs until their eyes hurt. They had called in experts from every species. Nothing worked for long. I found something, his assistant said, pulling up a document. Instructions the humans left in the database, step-by-step procedures for maintaining these systems. Vortis grabbed the document eagerly. Then he started reading and his hope faded. The instructions were there, yes, but they required knowledge his team didn't have. They referenced equipment configurations he didn't understand. They assumed familiarity with concepts he had never studied. It's like they wrote this for other humans, he said quietly. They knew we wouldn't be able to follow it. Maybe that was the point, his assistant replied. Maybe they wanted us to realize how much we depended on them. Medical facilities across the galaxy were overwhelmed. Dr. Ceylon had assembled a team of the best doctors from 7 species. Together they were trying to recreate the human medical protocols. They had been working for 3 months. They had successfully replicated 1 protocol. 1. It covered basic treatment for 3 species in 1 type of emergency. The humans had developed protocols for 47 species across thousands of medical situations. Dr. Ceylon's team would need decades to match that achievement. Meanwhile, people were dying. Preventable deaths. Deaths that wouldn't have happened if the human doctors were still there. Every morning, Dr. Ceylon reviewed the casualty reports and felt the weight of her arrogance crushing her. She had called human methods overcomplicated. She had insisted she could do better. She had been so wrong. The logistics crisis had become catastrophic. Kellen had given up trying to fix the routing system. Instead, he was just trying to prevent complete collapse. Ships were being routed manually now, which meant delays, mistakes, and inefficiencies. Food shortages were spreading. 27 worlds had declared emergencies. Agricultural colonies couldn't distribute their harvests. Manufacturing worlds couldn't receive raw materials. The intricate web of trade that had sustained the galaxy for centuries was unraveling. Kellen spent his nights studying Bo-Ra's network design. The more he understood it, the more amazed he became. It wasn't just efficient, it was elegant. It accounted for thousands of variables simultaneously. It adapted to changing conditions in real time. It predicted problems before they occurred. And the humans had made it look simple. They had hidden their genius behind friendly smiles and quiet competence. We're not going to fix this, are we? His assistant asked one night. Not without help, Kellen admitted. Not without the people who built it. On Ceres Prime, violence had erupted in 3 cities. Young beings who had grown up learning tolerance were now fighting each other. The cultural exchange programs that had kept peace were gone. The old hatreds, suppressed for a generation, were returning with terrible force. The planetary governor sent desperate requests to the Council for conflict resolution specialists. But the specialists were gone. Taemin and his teams had been the galaxy's experts in preventing exactly this kind of violence. Without them, local authorities had no idea how to stop the escalating conflicts. 4 people died in riots, then 12, then 27. The governor declared martial law. Military forces moved in to keep order. But military force couldn't change hearts and minds. It couldn't teach people to understand each other. Only the human programs had been able to do that, and those programs were dark. By day 90, the council was in complete disarray. 3 species had formally withdrawn. They blamed the council's incompetence for the cascading failures. 12 more were considering withdrawal. Border regions were in chaos. Without Captain Wu Jin's security forces, pirate raids had increased by 400%. Trade vessels were being attacked. Colony worlds were being raided. The Elder Race's security forces were stretched impossibly thin, trying to cover territory that human ships had protected. The Vakari matriarch called another emergency session. Communication was still limited to the crude text translation system. It took hours to discuss what should have taken minutes. "We need to contact Earth," she announced. "We need to ask for the humans' return." The Kelthan senator who had celebrated their departure looked broken. "They won't come back, why would they? We treated them with contempt. We dismissed their contributions. We called them maintenance crew. We have to try," the matriarch insisted. "We have no choice." "What do we offer them?" a Nephrim representative asked. "What could we possibly give them that would make them forget how we treated them?" "Respect," the matriarch said quietly. "We offer them what we should have given them from the beginning. Respect, recognition, equality." The council voted. For the first time in its 12,000-year history, the vote was unanimous. They would ask humanity to return. They would offer them full voting rights, leadership positions, and genuine partnership. But first, someone had to draft the message. And that proved surprisingly difficult. How do you apologize for centuries of dismissal? How do you ask someone to save you after you treated them as beneath you? The matriarch worked on the message for 3 days. She wrote and rewrote it dozens of times. Finally, she recorded her transmission. Her crystalline form was visibly cracked with stress. Her light was dim. She looked old and tired. But her words were honest. "To Ambassador Jinwu and the people of Earth," she began, "I am Matriarch Salinas of the Vokari, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. We owe you an apology that cannot adequately be expressed in words, but we must try." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You built the foundation of our civilization. You created the systems that allowed us to communicate, to trade, to heal our sick, to teach our children, to live in peace. And we never acknowledged it. We took your labor for granted. We dismissed your expertise. We treated you as servants when you were architects." Her form flickered with emotion. "We are now experiencing the consequences of our arrogance. Our systems are failing. Our people are suffering. Our civilization is fracturing. We have tried to repair what you built, and we have failed. We lack not only your technical expertise, but your wisdom, your patience, and your vision." She straightened, her voice becoming firmer. "We cannot survive without you, not because you are better than us, but because you were our partners, and we refuse to see it. We are asking you to return, not as maintenance crew, not as subordinates, but as equals, as leaders, as the essential members of our galactic community that you always were." She ended with a simple, devastating admission. "We need you. We always needed you. We were just too blind to see it." The message was sent to Earth. Then the waiting began. On Earth, Jinwu watched the matriarch's message with his senior team. They sat in silence as her words filled the room. When it ended, no one spoke for a long moment. "She means it," Haiwan said finally. "You can hear it in her voice. She finally understands." "One person understanding isn't enough," Donghyun replied. "The entire council needs to change." "The council voted unanimously to send this message," Nari reported, reading the attached documentation. "Every species agreed, even the ones who were most dismissive of us." Jinwu stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth was peaceful. Humanity had returned home and found comfort there. They weren't suffering like the council was. They didn't need to go back. But the galaxy was dying without them. "We always knew it would come to this," he said. "The question is what we do now." "Do we make them suffer more?" someone asked. "Teach them a harder lesson?" "No," Jinwu replied. "We taught them the lesson they needed. Now it's time to decide what kind of people we want to be. Do we let civilizations fall out of spite? Or do we help rebuild, but on our own terms. Haiwan stood beside him. You already know what you want to do. I want to help, Jinwoo admitted. Not because I've forgiven them, but because people are dying. Innocent people who never dismissed us. Children who had nothing to do with the Council's arrogance. So we return, Taemin said. But what are our terms? Jinwoo turned back to face the room. We return as equals. Full voting rights. Representation proportional to contribution. Humans in every leadership position. And respect. Genuine, consistent, unwavering respect. And if they refuse, then we let them fall, Jinwoo said simply. We gave them everything once and they threw it away. If they won't meet our terms now after everything that's happened, then they'll never change. The room was quiet as everyone considered this. Finally, Bora spoke. Some of them won't accept our terms. The proud ones. The stubborn ones. Then we don't help them, Jinwoo replied. We help the ones who are willing to change. We build something new with the species who finally see us. He looked around the room at his tired, brilliant colleagues. Send the response. Tell them we're willing to talk. But this time, they come to us. 18 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council formally dissolved. The announcement came on a gray morning at Council Station Prime. Transmitted through the barely functional communication networks to thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Matriarch Selenis stood before the empty council chamber, her crystalline form covered in stress fractures that would never fully heal. She had aged centuries in 18 months. Behind her, the chamber that had once held 47 species now sat vacant. The seats were dusty. The lights were dim. The data chip that had started everything still rested on the podium, a silent reminder of their failure. The Galactic Council as it existed for 12,000 years is no more, she said into the recording device. 32 species have withdrawn. 15 have formed separate coalitions. The remaining species lack the numbers and resources to maintain the Council's original purpose. She paused, her voice heavy with emotion. We failed, not because we lacked intelligence or resources, but because we lacked wisdom. We built our civilization on the labor of those we refused to see, and when they left, we discovered that we had built nothing at all. They had built everything, and we had simply stood in the light of their achievement, calling it our own. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions watched the collapse of an institution that had seemed eternal. Some felt relief. Some felt fear. Many felt regret. On Earth, humanity watched too. Jinwoo had received hundreds of messages in the past months. Pleas for help, apologies, offers, some were genuine. Others were clearly desperate attempts to manipulate humanity into returning without real change. He had responded to some, ignored others, and waited to see who would actually meet his terms. The Kelthon were first to arrive. Their delegation landed in Geneva, at the headquarters of Earth's diplomatic corps. Elder Kareth led them, looking diminished and humble in a way that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Jinwoo met them in a simple conference room. No grand ceremony, no elaborate protocols, just a table, chairs, and the truth. Ambassador Jinwoo, Karath began. The Kelthon formally request humanity's assistance in rebuilding our civilization. We accept your terms without reservation, full voting rights, proportional representation, human leadership, and respect. Jinwoo studied the elder's face. Why should we believe you? For 3 centuries, my people served the council. For 3 centuries, we were dismissed and demeaned. Why is it different now? Karath's silver skin rippled with shame. Because we learned what we should have known all along. That competence speaks in quiet voices. That the most essential work is often invisible. That those who serve without demanding recognition are the most worthy of it. Pretty words, Jinwoo replied. But I've heard pretty words before. They mean nothing without action. Then let us prove it with action, Karath said. We've begun teaching our children about humanity's contributions. We've changed our education curriculum to emphasize collaboration over hierarchy. We've dismantled the systems that allowed elder races to dominate younger ones. Jinwoo looked at the documentation Karath had brought. It was extensive. Real changes, not just promises. He nodded slowly. We'll send a team to evaluate your needs. But understand this, we work together now or not at all. Together, Karath agreed. As equals. The Nephirim came next. Then the Vokari. Then 17 other species, each offering genuine change. each accepting humanity's terms, each ready to build something new. But 15 species refused. Their pride wouldn't allow them to accept human equality. They believed they could rebuild on their own. They were wrong. Dr. Haiwan was part of the first team to return to Council space. She arrived on the Kelthon homeworld to find medical facilities in crisis. Thousands were sick. Hundreds had died. The doctors were working desperately with inadequate protocols. A Kelthon physician named Silan met her at the spaceport. The woman looked exhausted and broken. "Dr. Haiwan," she said, "thank you for coming. I'm the one who changed the vaccine protocol against your warnings. 63 people died because of my arrogance." Haiwan felt a flash of anger, then saw the genuine grief in Silan's eyes. "Are you willing to learn now?" "I've been trying to learn for 18 months, Silan replied. "But your protocols were more complex than I understood. I need a teacher." "Then let's teach each other," Haiwan said. "You know things I don't about Kelthon physiology. I know things you don't about cross-species medicine. Together, we'll be better than either of us alone." They worked side by side for weeks.
Haiwan taught.
Silan learned. But more importantly, they collaborated. They combined Kelthon medical knowledge with human protocols and created something better than either had been separately. Other humans returned to other worlds. Dong-hyun went to Council Station Prime with a team of engineers. The station was in terrible condition, barely habitable. Vortis greeted them with obvious relief. "I made so many mistakes," Vortis admitted. "I thought I knew better than you. I was wrong about everything." Dong-hyun looked at the failing systems and felt a moment of satisfaction. Then he remembered the people living here, suffering because of poor maintenance. His satisfaction faded. "Show me what you've tried. We'll fix it together." They worked for months, Dong-hyun's team teaching while Vortis's team learned. Slowly, the station came back to life. But this time, everyone understood why each procedure was necessary. Everyone knew how the systems worked. Bo-ra returned to restore the logistics network with Kellen's team. She found the mathematician studying her original designs with something close to awe. "It's beautiful," Kellen told her. "I've been analyzing your work for a year. Every time I think I understand it, I discover another elegant solution I missed." "How did you design something so complex?" "I didn't design it alone," Bo-ra replied. "I had teams from 5 different species contributing ideas. I just listened to everyone and found ways to combine their insights. But humans built the core system. The foundation everything else rests on." Bo-ra smiled. "Because no one else wanted to do the boring work of building foundations. Everyone wanted to design the impressive parts. We built the foundation because it needed building, and we didn't care about getting credit." "That was our mistake," Kellen said quietly. "We only valued what looked impressive. We never looked at what made the impressive things possible." Together, they rebuilt the network. But this time, Kellen and his team understood it. They could maintain it. They could improve it. They were partners, not dependents. Taemin returned to Cetus Prime, where violence had torn communities apart. He found a generation of young people who had forgotten how to see each other as equals. The work ahead was daunting, but he wasn't alone. Local educators joined him, people who had been trying to keep peace during humanity's absence. Together, they rebuilt the cultural exchange programs but made them stronger. They incorporated local traditions, local wisdom, and local teachers. "Your programs were good," one local educator told Taemin, "but they were human programs. We need programs that belong to all of us." "You're right," Taemin agreed. "I should have helped you create your own programs instead of just giving you ours. Let's fix that mistake." Not everything went smoothly. Some species who had accepted human help still struggled with old prejudices. Some humans found it hard to trust species who had dismissed them for centuries. Building genuine partnership took time, but they were trying. That was what mattered. The new accord formed 6 months after humanity's return. 17 species signed the charter, establishing new rules based on contribution rather than age, on collaboration rather than hierarchy. Humans took leadership roles, but so did members of other species who had previously been overlooked. The inaugural ceremony was held on neutral ground, a space station that humanity and the Kelthan built together. Representatives from all member species gathered. This time when Jin Woo spoke, everyone listened. "We're not here to recreate what was," he said. "The old council was built on assumptions that didn't work. That age meant wisdom. That elder races deserved dominance. That quiet work was unimportant. We know better now. He looked around the room at faces from dozens of species. The new accord is built on different principles. We value contribution over tradition. We respect competence over seniority. We listen to quiet voices because we learned that those voices often speak the deepest truths. Matriarch Selenis approached him after the ceremony. She looked smaller than she had in the old council chamber. Her crystalline form was still cracked, permanent scars of her failure. "Why did you leave the data chip?" she asked. "You knew we wouldn't understand it. You knew it would show us exactly what we lost." Jinwoo considered his answer carefully. "We left it so that when you finally looked, when you finally cared to look, you would understand. We never wanted you to need us, Matriarch. We wanted you to see us." "We see you now," Selenis said, her voice thick with regret. "I fear it's too late." "It's not too late," Jinwoo replied gently. "It's just the beginning. But this time we build together. No one is invisible. No one is unimportant. Everyone's contribution matters. The species who refuse to join us," Selenis said, "the ones who still cling to their pride. What happens to them? They'll figure it out eventually. Or they won't. That's their choice." Jinwoo looked out the viewport at the stars. "We offered help to everyone. Some accepted, some refused. We can't force species to change. We can only build something better and hope they eventually want to join us. And if they never do, then they'll live with the consequences of their choices. Just like we all do." Over the following years, the new accord flourished. Medical care improved as human and non-human doctors collaborated. Trade networks became more efficient with mixed-species logistics teams. Education systems taught children from all species to value cooperation over dominance. Some of the species who had initially refused began to reconsider. They watched their civilizations struggle while the accord thrived. Pride was cold comfort when your people were suffering. 3 years after the accord's founding, the first rejected species applied for membership. They met the requirements Jinwoo had established. They had restructured their governments. They had changed their education systems. They had learned to value all contributions, not just the ones that seemed impressive. They were accepted. Others followed, but not all of them. 5 species remained isolated, unable or unwilling to abandon their old ways. Their civilizations slowly declined, trapped by the same arrogance that had destroyed the original council. On Earth, Nari taught classes to young humans planning to work in the Accord. She told them stories about the old council, about being dismissed and ignored, about the silent exodus, about watching everything collapse. "Why did we go back?" a student asked. "After they treated us so badly, why did we help them?" Nari thought about it. "Because we're not them." They dismissed people for being different, for being quiet, for doing work they couldn't see. "If we became like them, if we let people suffer just to prove a point, then we'd lose what makes us human." "But they had to learn a lesson," another student said. "And they did," Nari replied. "A harsh one. But once the lesson was learned, continuing to punish them would have been cruelty, not justice. We left so they'd understand our value. We returned so they'd understand our character." Jinwoo, now retired from active diplomacy, sat in a garden on Earth and watched the sunset. Haewon sat beside him, her hands still showing the stains of a long career in medicine. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked, going back. Jinwoo smiled. "Yes, but on our terms. That was important. We could have returned as saviors, let them remain dependent. Instead, we returned as partners. We taught them to build, not just how to use what we built. Some people think we should have let them collapse completely. Some civilizations did collapse," Jinwoo replied, "the ones who refused to change. But we couldn't let innocent people suffer just to punish guilty governments. That wouldn't have been justice. It would have been revenge." "The galaxy is different now," Haewon observed. "Better, I think," Jinwoo said. "Not perfect. Still struggling with old prejudices and new problems, but better. Because people finally learned to see the hands that build the world." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans worked alongside dozens of other species, building a civilization that valued every contribution. Somewhere children learned that competence speaks quietly. Somewhere the lessons of humanity's departure were being taught to new generations. The Galactic Council had fallen. The new Accord had risen, and humanity had finally claimed their place not as maintenance crew, but as architects of a better future. They hadn't needed to shout. They had simply stopped holding everything together. And in the silence of their absence, the galaxy had finally heard their voice. And when they returned, the galaxy finally listened.